choose whether I wanted to get a spanking by my mother or by my father. I chose my mother was a little lighter on me than my father. We got to let them choose who they want a whipping by, Chump or us.
Yes, absolutely. Look, there are advocates on the far right that are on social media that are sending letters to CEOs. And they're saying to them, you are engaged in illegal, quote unquote, DEI. Nobody really knows what that means, but that's what they're saying. And some of these CEOs, some of these companies run scared. And then they issue a press release. And the press release says, we are revamping our diversity, equity, and inclusion program. In the case of Meta, we're eliminating it completely. Right? We're not just reevaluating, we're eliminating it completely. To the Rev's point, we're all buyers. We spend a lot of money. Let's make sure they understand when they do away with diversity, equity, and inclusion, what they're saying is, we do not value you. That's what they're saying. So every time you hear diversity, equity, and inclusion being taken away, what that means is we do not value you as a worker, as an investor, as a consumer, as a board member, in any capacity. Because if they did, they wouldn't do away with diversity, equity, and inclusion. What I mean is we have data for decades that shows the companies that embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion are more successful. They're more innovative. All the CEOs know this. The data's been out there for decades. So when they are saying we are eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion, they are ignoring the facts, and they're basically saying we do not value you. So let's remember that, to the Rev's point, we don't need every single person out there protesting. But what we need you to do is think about when you spend your dollars, who are you spending it with? Who are you spending it with? And if we all do that, to your point, Rev, these companies will think twice before they decide to retreat.
Give him a hand, Alfonso David. All right, let me say that there are few people, y'all can turn the music off, I'm not singing right now. There are few people that I think has had their hand on the pulse more on what's going on in this country, and then has the courage and nerve to bring it out and let you make your own decisions and give you the facts. And I've known him, I've watched him, and he has always been on point. He's a trained lawyer. He is also the personification to me of what media ought to be about. And he is also a real scholar when it comes to hip hop and rap. Bring on my colleague from MSNBC, Brother Ari Melba.
How we doing? Good. Is New York in the house? Is Brooklyn in the house? Okay. Is Harlem in the house? Okay.
Oh, you local. We got folks from all over the country now and here. I don't have to go down the list again, but let me get into it, and then I have a little surprise I want to do with you, because you always do this to me, so I'm going to do it to you. First, from your perspective, what is the significance of the results of yesterday's elections in Wisconsin and in Florida?
You have the richest man in the world trying to buy your democracy, and the people still have the power to say no. The work you do, and everyone in this room is familiar with how often and how aggressively the right to vote is attacked and targeted through our history. It's one of the ugliest parts of our history. And yet we also know, just as Senator Booker eloquently quoted so many civil rights leaders yesterday, for more than 24 hours running, including John Lewis, that you can react and fight that and you can win. So that alone, given that I said this on the program, but I will say it here, judicial local elections are supposed to be boring. They're not supposed to be national news. They usually aren't. And they certainly aren't supposed to be expensive. This was the most expensive ever, partly because of the out-of-state money, and they still won. And then you saw in Florida, which in very red districts, including Matt Gaetz' district, you saw Democrats improve their showing while not making up 20 points. So this is the first recorded voting pushback to this Trump era that we're in.
President Trump announced tariffs today. What will that mean to the people in this room? And as I said, we have delegates here from around, I think it's 31 states as of this morning. What will that mean to us? We hear the word tariff, and some of us are not sure of what that means to us or the members of the chapters wherever we are in National Action Network.
This is a simple one. Like some of the stories Rev and I work on get quite complicated. This is very simple. There's two types of tariffs. There's strategic tariffs, and there's dumb tariffs. That's what the Wall Street Journal has called Trump's tariffs. And so sometimes there are reasons why you have targeted tariffs to achieve a very specific goal. You might want to support labor rights in the United States. You might have an issue with a single country, and you negotiate that way rather than more extreme measures. This guy's out here just trying to tariff everybody. And the Wall Street Journal also called it a $6 trillion tax on Americans, because the first people that will pay for it are people buying stuff, whether that's at the big box store, at Walmart, if you need to buy a car. There's not a single car that is produced entirely inside the United States, which means tariffs will lead to price rises on every conceivable car you might have to buy. Or if you get in an Uber and he bought his car tomorrow instead of last year, that price gets passed on. So my working theory is that Donald Trump likes the parts of governing that are easy and fast, and he doesn't have to work with anyone else. So he's leaning harder on tariffs than anyone in either party ever has, because he's learned on the job over time, oh, I can just do this by myself. And legally he can. These are authorized powers. But it's going to be pricey.
The whole question of a third term constitutionally is a hard hill to climb. Explain that, put on your lawyer hat, explain what they would have to do to have a third term. Because my suspicion, Ari, is that he threw that out there to try to get us off of talking about this signal gate, and because he knows that it is hard. But explain to us what he would have to do to even get a third term. And secondly, what is the significance of signal gate that he's trying to get us distracted from?
Well, as they might say in My Cousin Vinny, the great movie, you got better odds of getting good grits in Canada than getting a third term. It's illegal. So the Constitution limits you to 2 terms for the president. Other people in Congress can serve a lot longer. We all remember Rangel or Bernie Sanders has been in Congress most of his adult life. But the Constitution says only 2 terms. So the first thing to know is when somebody, whether it's Donald Trump, which he said he's not joking, or his allies, when they say that, they are eliciting what lawyers call illegal intent, which is part of one of the elements you need to prove someone broke the law. They know this is illegal, unlawful in the Constitution. That's number one. That's bad for them. Number two, we still have courts, as the president's recently been reminded. So if a political party said we want to put Trump's name on the ballot for a third term, that would be challenged, and the courts, by all precedent, would say you're ineligible. So you can't even put the name on the ballot. So that's that. The third thing is the problem we've had is he didn't leave peacefully last time. This is true in government. It's true in relationships. The best predictor of behavior is behavior, okay? You say, well, oh, he wouldn't do it again. What do you mean? Again, he already did it. He's the most likely person to do it again, whatever it may be in your life, right? So he didn't leave peacefully last time. Before 100 days are up, they're talking about illegally holding on to power. We should take it seriously. As journalists, we'll cover it and tell you the facts. I'm not going to hide the ball. It's illegal. And they say they have other measures. Well, like January 6th, those other measures may also be illegal. That's that. Signal Gate reminds you that it's not just ideology, it's not just law. You've got a bunch of unqualified, incompetent people. Now, I'm not saying all of them. We will assess each story and each person by what happens. But if you're making mistakes that high schoolers don't make on their, like anyone with a high schooler, well, they'll tell you, hey, mom, like, no, that's not how that works. You got to fix the phone. And you got people running the Pentagon who would be like unable to take a flash photo that looked any good at a high school dance, right? And don't have the wherewithal to say, let me go to the intelligence folks or someone smarter to deal with this. So it's incompetence, whether they're trying to distract from that or not. It's a huge risk for the country.
And it is a huge risk they were talking about an actual attack in Yemen. This was not a planning meeting. It was 2 hours after the call, the attack happened, which could have meant, and they killed an innocent child in that building, which nobody talks about. It's like their lives don't matter. But if somebody had intercepted that, you could have had the American military ambush going in. I mean, there was danger on all sides.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you, in terms of the rise of those that are saying we need new leadership in either party. What I tell a lot of our young chapter leaders here in NAN that are young, that it is not just age, it's agenda. I think, yes, older people need to let younger people lead. But let's not forget, I was talking to a guy, he may be in here, he said, we need young leadership. I said, how old are you? He said, 43. I said, you do realize you're older than J.D. Vance. He said, no. I said, you do realize Stephen Miller, one of the architects of Project 2025, is 37 years old. So this is not about youth. This is not about age. It's about agenda. I'd rather have old folks on my side than young folks doing Project 2025. So how do we strike the balance, Ari, between older people that are wise, that know the traps and should be willing to share that to bring on the next generation, and younger people that want to innovate, do it their way, be creative, but also take advantage of the wisdom of the old? How do we do that?
It's such a great question. You put it very incisively because there's a tension there. I said some things that before are simple. This is a lot more nuanced, especially when you're going up against Elon Musk, billionaire capitalized corporations, multinational corporations, all the political tricks in the book. I don't mean to shout you out at your own event, but Al Sharpton has spent decades dealing with the three-dimensional chess of politics at the local level, because dealing with police and police unions is one thing. Then the state level and the government, and what is the state law about how we investigate police misconduct, which is why your relationships with different politicians has borne fruit, or at the federal level, or the international level. You throw someone who's an awesome young Al Sharpton, who doesn't have the Al Sharpton experience yet, they're gonna need time, and you make mistakes on the job, and so you need both. When you think about the generational aspect of this, like DMX said,
You know he was going to do it, right?
I've been rapping 20 years. You're 20 years old. And I'm basically saying to the next young bucks, like, I have your lifetime on wax and in work, and you have that on some of these folks. And yet the BLM movement in that really took fire, partly initially in Ferguson, but then definitely in 2020, did have a lot of impact, and a lot of young people were in the streets. A lot of older people were in the streets. When we covered it, one time I remember we took footage, and I said, well, let's pause it here and look at how diverse this crowd is in every way. In race, in age. We never want to invite any pain or hurt for anyone, but one of the protesters who ended up comatose in the hospital, tragically, was this elderly white man who was linked arms with young people of color and tragically got hurt, and for some people that woke them up. So you need it all, but I think for the Democratic Party, you had a candidate who was seen as having served his country, President Biden, but eventually was actually operating in a manner where people said, we need to make an emergency change because of fitness concerns. You have a Senate leader where Chuck Schumer, I know you have a great relationship with him, but he has been in the job for a long time. And it's not like they say, well, we'll give you that guy, but then we'll also give you AOC. Not really, because Schumer's deputy is Dick Durbin, who's also been at it for a long time. That's right. So if you're asking me as someone who reports on this, the fact that the Democratic Party, which has always seen itself as at least trying to be the voice of progress, that usually means the future, not the past, working people, what America actually looks like and is going to continue to look like, whether they like it or not, which is diversity in youth, and can't point to one of the top 3 or 4 voices being anyone from the newer generation. I think that's a challenge for them. It's not my job to tell them what to do, but it's a challenge.
It's a challenge. Talking about that, I want to bring out, since you're in the music, a brother that has been legendary for a long time. He's the second most sampled artist. He's been sampled by Megan Thee Stallion, by Biggie, by Nas, by LL Cool J, by LaBelle, who'll be here tonight. 198 samples. And let's bring him back to the stage, Brother Al B. Shaw. Now, talk about, I want you, Ari, and then you, Al, to talk about this mixture of culture and politics, because I think that a lot of us don't understand how one informs the other in many ways. I remember when I was in high school, we were influenced by the Last Poets. And I will never forget, they had this song, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," even though I'm on television now, but I remember that song. And and then James Brown. Many of us were arguing about whether to call us Negro or Black. James Brown did one song, and we all started calling ourselves Black. And I think when I started rising up here in New York, fighting police and racial violence cases, because it wasn't all police. Howard Beach was not police. Benson House was not police. Public Enemy came out, Fight the Power. And it became the track to our fight. tell us how this mixture has influenced more than people think, the mixture of culture. And it worked on the country western side. It's worked for Trump on the country west. He uses wrestling, and even put a wrestling boss in as the head of the education department. So how does this mixture work?
We're talking about culture. And culture matters to people, and it's not usually homework. You know, they're important books, but a lot of times you gotta get them in school and you read them, you gotta remember them. It's homework. It doesn't take anything to remember a great hook from one of your songs, or a great movie that you love, or you mentioned Do the Right Thing. Fight the Power this year was named by Rolling Stone as the greatest protest song of all time.
That's right.
But if you look at the layers and etymology of Fight the Power, what Chuck D did was draw on multiple singers and James Brown and sampled the words of civil rights preachers. So the actual sonic experience is layered. The music video has all of these references, and if you know, you know. So you say, oh, that's the Black Panthers. Oh, that's a reference to SNCC. Oh, that's this history. But if you don't know, and everyone starts out as a baby knowing nothing, I went to Quincy Jones Public High School in Seattle, and we were listening to these songs, and that's how we learn not only about music and culture, but then, as you say, about wider experiences. So to me, it's always been natural. When I was in high school, I would quote lyrics in class, and people would be like, stop. And I would be like, no. And as the old saying goes, Al, look at me now. Look at me now. I'm getting paper, etc. You know. The point is that the things we share, because we actually love and have appreciation for it, is a beautiful thing. And that's what culture is. And yes, politics is tough and hard, and it's often depressing. But when we have culture as a part of it, and as you say, that can be part of a candidate trying to connect and campaign, or it could be a natural thing where we actually say, no, I love that, and you love that, and we get closer. That's the positive side. That makes it richer and deeper, and I believe ultimately helps us see each other as full human beings. And when you see the full spirit of other people, you actually don't need as many rules. And yet so much of the dark side of politics is dehumanizing certain groups and trying to keep us from doing that.
LB, how does culture affect politics and politics affect culture?
Thank you, Rev. You know, I remember I was in the 90s, I went from being a full-time artist to the vice president of Motown of A&R, and learning some of the stories about Motown. And I remember at one point, I heard this really interesting story about Marvin Gaye and Berry Gordy. Marvin Gaye wanted to utilize his musical expression to give a political statement, and Berry Gordy was against it. Obviously, the head of the label wants to sell records, but Marvin Gaye was deeply immersed into the movement and so on and so forth. So it was always interesting hearing that. And so it was interesting even for myself when I started to understand you know, you hear the kids say the music business. It's the business of music. And probably one of the most important aspects of the business of music is publishing. You see most artists out here touring and so on and so forth, and it's great that they can still do it. But, you know, there's a song by, is it Billy Joel? I write the songs that make the whole world sing. And so that's in the business. If you're encouraging young people who have aspirations to be a musician, make sure they are self-contained and they're writing their songs and they're making sure that they're owning their what's called IP, their intellectual property. Rev, I've been so blessed to, you know, just over the years how hip-hop has embraced this really funny name, Al B. Sure, which, if you want to know how I got the name, I was working with DJ Eddie F. in high school. There was a rapper named Dana Dane. Remember the song?
Yeah.
Remember the song Nightmares, Rev? So it was one Halloween, and in the song, Dana Dane says, I said, listen, Dana Dane, I think I have the cure, but I have to hear more before. He wasn't saying I'll be sure, it was I'll be sure. But Eddie F was so dope on the turntables, he made it sound like, I'll be sure. So that next Monday morning in high school, everybody in the hallway was calling me I'll be sure. But with that, it's been amazing to see how, for some reason, hip hop has embraced. I was watching television, the Jamie Foxx show, Friends, Martin Lawrence, and there's always, and at first I was trying to figure out, are they making fun of me? But yes, you have to learn to laugh at yourself, because there's a mention of I'll be sure, in whether it's Cardi B dancing in her driveway saying Night and Day is her favorite, right? You see, saying it's her favorite song, or being mentioned by Black Thought in The Roots. So I think even the mentions of the name I'll be sure, for some reason, the brand has just continued. So I'm thankful to all the young hip hop artists, everybody from, right? Let's thank you to hip hop. The other king of hip hop here, Ari. But thank you for hip hop for embracing me over the years, because it's now expanded to, imagine an artist. Have you heard of a gentleman by the name of Eminem? One of the world's biggest artists. He was at a station in Detroit doing a freestyle, and he's going through his cadence, and as you know, he's a brilliant, rapper. At the end of the rap, he says, so-and-so, verbal cow manure, something, coming together like an eyebrow, and I'll be sure. And the whole station fell out. Apparently, Dr. Dre calls the station and signs him. So there are so many historic moments that either my song has been sampled, whether it's Snoop Dogg, or whether it's Big Old Freak by Megan Thee Stallion. So a lot of these songs, or ZZ Top and a group in Houston. I didn't know that I was part of a national anthem in Houston. There's a song called 25 lighters on my dresser, yes sir, I got to get paid, which is actually a ZZ Top song mixed with another hip hop group there. So hearing it in all walks of life has been truly a blessing. Having an opportunity to be signed at Warner Brothers when I was 19 years old. My first production job was working on songs for Rod Stewart, Robert Palmer, doing duets with David Bowie, Diana Ross, Barry White, James Ingram, El DeBarge, having an opportunity to work on this young kid who was dropped off at the studio named Usher. Another young man, Tevin Campbell. So just the blessings have been working under someone who you and I, God rest his soul, and Rev, someone who admired you as well, Dr. Quincy Jones, and learning from him. So to make it brief, I learned my chops. Mayor, the mayor of Mount Vernon is here. Okay, I wanted to make sure, acknowledge you again. So going from basement to basement, from Eddie's basement to Kyle's basement, Andre Harrell telling me to get on the train and don't get jumped, go sit with this guy named Theodore, Teddy Riley. So I got to Teddy Riley's house, and I'm sleeping on the couch for 6 months. I never left, and he taught me song arrangement. So I went from Teddy Riley to Quincy Jones, and learn the polish and learn the street. So I incorporated that in my art moving forward all along the way. So it's just been a blessing. It's been a total blessing. And I just wanted to really actually be here to say thank you for allowing my art to be any part of your journey. I was speaking to a gentleman backstage, and he says, man, you got me through high school. And now, even with the health that we were discussing earlier, people would come up to me and say, brother, man, I thank you, because I put that I'll Be Sure joint on, and now people walk up to me and lean in and say, "We've been praying for you. We thank you for advocating for health care and being transparent with your story." So the evolution has been worth it. It's been truly worth it, and I'm thankful. And first of all, Ari, I'm thankful for you for always keeping the lyrics alive on such a national platform. Your brother at ESPN, God rest his soul, you remember every basketball game, every football game, every time he's commentating, he would have hip-hop lyrics. Stuart Scott, remember Stuart Scott on ESPN? Yep. So it's amazing, but it's so amazing how you know every daggone rap lyric.
That I want to get to that. Because you know all of these. I mean, just off the top of your head. I've been blessed to do your show a lot, and I mean, somebody could say something, and it would trigger you quoting a song. So I knew you didn't know they were going to say it because we all are speaking spontaneously. I've been around music all my life, coming out of the church, and then James Brown's son, I was tight, his son got killed, so James kind of adopted me. So I took for granted knowing all the artists because everybody came to James. So I knew some of it, but I never was like you. I remember we fought to have the first Democratic nominee debate at the Apollo, and I jumped on Al Gore and the Senator Bradley, and made them debate at the Apollo. First time they ever had a presidential debate at the Apollo. And as we were coming in that night for the debate, and I'm all proud we got this done, young kid made me think about it when Al B was talking. Young guy walked over to me and said, "Reverend Sharpton," I said, "Yeah." He said, "Honored to meet you. I'm an usher." I said, "Usher at what church?" I had no idea who he was. And he looked at me, I think he thought I was kidding, but I really didn't know. So I called home, I told Dominic Ashley, I said, "I met some kids that say you got a record out named Usher." They were, Usher. So to this day, when he sees me, he says, "Don't talk about you glad to see me. You thought I was Usher the church." What made you different than me to where you're enmeshed in this, and it bleeds into your media work and your politics?
Yeah, Rev's admitting that you're hip to so much, but not hip to everything. The first time he met Dr. Dre, he said, "Oh, are you on call this weekend?" Like, what kind of physician? You know, it could happen to any of us. Yeah, I mean, I love that we're having this conversation here, and I want to remind everyone the theme this year for NAN is being a light in dark times.
That's right.
So we need that, and we look to culture and our elders and what we love, because you can't let them kill your light and shine, even though you care so much about things that some days people wake up very concerned. To answer your question, I mean, I think that what music in general did for me at a young age was open whole new worlds. I don't know what it's like for someone growing up today with the phone and the internet, but when I was 12, it was 1992, and it wasn't really internet, and I was going through my parents' vinyl. So I start there. My parents married 52 years in the same house in Seattle. I have great parents, Dan and Barbara Melber, and going through their vinyl, to me, was an exploration. I went hours on that. Aretha, Bob Dylan, Sly and the Family Stone. I remember with the leg kicked up on the cover, because the image was like you're a kid, and then you pull out the vinyl. Now, that was still old school for then, because the CDs were the main thing. But that was like learning stories and ideas that weren't in the textbook, and we didn't have the internet. And I think that continues on today, which is why it's so powerful. So that's where it started for me, and then I've always been interested in reading and writing and poetry. And hip-hop is poetry, you know? And so those lines echo in my head when I hear things, and it just, like I said, I wouldn't stop. So for me, that's how it worked. The last little Sharpton point I'll share, because I don't always get to share the personal stories, is one time we were talking about Trump paying the hush money. And Reverend Al was on my show, And I said, it's like Pusha T said, we live in this life with all this guns and violence. The hush money's the only moment of silence. And then Push hopped on socials and he posted it, which as a fan is crazy, just like you talked about your experience. That's crazy. I was like, oh my God, like this is rapper I look up to and he's posting our moment. And then he captioned it, dope, comma, but please, not in front of Reverend Al.
Yeah, I remember that. We only got a little under 4 minutes left. Name for me, LB, the 3 artists that most influenced you as you evolved. And Ari, name for me your 3 favorite artists.
I'll go quick and hand it to you. Hove, Jay-Z, Bob Marley, which I really grew up on, and from in my high school, Tupac. We had the double disc, and he was like all things, cooler than you could ever be, tougher than anyone I knew, and if you really listen, a total poet about humanity and justice and fighting the power. And so I was like, sometimes people are like, I want to be like him. I was like, well, I'll never be like him. I will never walk in a room and have someone say, oh, you're like Pac. But it was the full inspiration.
Wow. So, Rev, I would have to say I've always patterned myself after Quincy Jones, which his name is Quincy Delight Jones Jr. In high school, I used to dress like Michael Jackson, but I thought I was Slick Rick. So I had a little bit of a twisted moment. And that's when you hear, on the Off on Your Own Girl song, everybody thought it was Slick Rick. All the fellas grab a girl and get out your seat and rock to the rhythm of this funky beat. My name is Rock to the rhythm, the rhythm, the rhythm of. That was me. That wasn't Slick Rick. That was me trying to emulate Slick Rick. So all of my music, Ari, from the beginning of the Rev, was derived from hip hop. Remember, I come from a place called Mount Vernon, and Andre Harrell, when I first got a deal with him, when we would call, this is before Uptown Records started, we made the first phone calls from Eddie F's basement, and he says, what's your name? I said, Al B. He said, what? He says, what's an Al B. Sure? I said, well, Heavy D and the boys. He said, what, the Fat Boys? I said, no, sir. And then he says to me, where are you from? I'm from Money Earning Mount Vernon. And he said, oh, you mean all y'all bushy Negroes who think you from the Bronx? Where hip hop started. But we take that very seriously, being, the first city right outside of the Bronx, where hip hop was born. But if you heard from Quincy Jones, Rev, Quincy Jones would tell you it was born in Africa. So I'm just grateful to be a part of the culture. I'm grateful for the culture embracing me all of these years, from Megan Thee Stallion to LL Cool J to The Roots to some of the most iconic artists around the globe. So they make it good when it's time to sell that publishing. Absolutely.
Give a hand, Ari Melba, Al B. Shaw. Give them a hand. Thank you very much. Did you ever? Yeah. All right. We go bring in, good to see you, Madam Mayor. We're getting ready to do our housing panel, then Alvin Bragg, then Joy Reid. Then y'all gonna go get ready for the dinner tonight. Shh. Let me say this too. A lot of people have a lot of concerns, and I want you to get those concerns to us. But don't run up in the middle of a panel and expect you're going to hand me something and I'm going to read your concern. That's not fair to you. It's not fair to me. If you see one of the people on our side, it will get to us and we will try to deal with it. But don't think being rude going to make us take you serious, because I think something wrong with you if you ain't got good manners. All right. Let us get ready to bring in, nothing is more important. Shh. All of y'all, please take that on the side. Yeah. Y'all can do that out in the hall, whatever that is. Nothing is more important than dealing with the issue of housing. One of the things that is killing our community around the country is that people cannot afford to stay where they are and can't afford to go somewhere different. Gentrification is real, affordable housing is real. So even though this is
Good morning. I'm House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries. It's a high honor and a distinct privilege to deliver words of greeting to you at this year's NAN conference. To the entire National Action Network family, board members, chapter leaders, elected officials in attendance, and all those assembled. Thank you for your presence and for your tremendous leadership at this moment as we continue the work of pushing forward in the righteous struggle for equality in this country. I'm certainly grateful for the legendary Reverend Al Sharpton, for his life's work, for his leadership, for all that he's doing, laboring in the vineyards of our community day after day, month after month, year after year. We know that Reverend Sharpton is a civil rights champion, a defender of the disenfranchised, a voice for the voiceless, and a powerful, profound, prophetic, principled preacher who continues to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice. These are challenging times here in the United States of America. We're dealing with wickedness in high places. The scripture tells us in 2 Corinthians, the 4th chapter, that's 2 Corinthians, not 2 Corinthians. If you're going to sell the Bible, you should know the Bible. In 2 Corinthians, the 4th chapter, 8th verse, the Apostle Paul writes, "We are troubled on every side, but not distressed, perplexed, but never in despair." It's certainly the case that we've got trouble on every side. Trouble in the White House, trouble in the Congress, trouble with the cabinet, trouble with Elon Musk, an unelected, unaccountable, unhinged, unpopular, and un-American puppeteer, all of whom want to take a chainsaw to the things that matter, a chainsaw to Social Security, a chainsaw to Medicare, a chainsaw to Medicaid, a chainsaw to civil rights, a chainsaw to voting rights. But together, we're going to make sure we take a chainsaw to Project 2025. That's what we're called upon to do at this moment. Trouble on every side, but we're not in distress, because we know we stand on the shoulders of giants, those who came before us, the giants of the civil rights movement, civil rights heroes and foot soldiers, those who stood on one side of the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday and had the courage, the character, and the conviction to stay the course because they understood that their cause was a righteous one. And now we find ourselves in a very similar moment, needing to channel that same level of courage, conviction, and character to push back against Donald Trump and his cowardly enablers in this Congress who want to cut the things that matter, like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, Head Start, and also want to turn back the clock. We're trying to move to you at this year's NAN conference, to the entire National Action Network family, board members, chapter leaders, elected officials in attendance, and all those assembled. Thank you for your presence and for your tremendous leadership at this moment as we continue the work of pushing forward in the righteous struggle for equality in this country. I'm certainly grateful for the legendary Reverend Al Sharpton, for his life's work, for his leadership, for all that he's doing, laboring in the vineyards of our community day after day, month after month, year after year. We know that Reverend Sharpton is a civil rights champion, a defender of the disenfranchised, a voice for the voiceless, and a powerful, profound, prophetic, principled preacher who continues to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice. These are challenging times here in the United States of America. We're dealing with wickedness in high places. The scripture tells us in 2 Corinthians, the 4th chapter, that's 2 Corinthians, not 2 Corinthians. If you're going to sell the Bible, you should know the Bible. In 2 Corinthians, the 4th chapter, 8th verse, the Apostle Paul writes, "We are troubled on every side, but not distressed, perplexed, but never in despair." It's certainly the case that we've got trouble on every side, trouble in the White House, trouble in the Congress, trouble with the cabinet, trouble with Elon Musk, an unelected, unaccountable, unhinged, unpopular, and un-American puppeteer, all of whom want to take a chainsaw to the things that matter, a chainsaw to Social Security, a chainsaw to Medicare, a chainsaw to Medicaid, a chainsaw to civil rights, a chainsaw to voting rights. But together, we're going to make sure we take a chainsaw to Project 2025. That's what we're called upon to do at this moment. Trouble on every side, but we're not in distress, because we know we stand on the shoulders of giants, those who came before us, the giants of the civil rights movement, civil rights heroes and foot soldiers, those who stood on one side of the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday and had the courage, the character, and the conviction to stay the course because they understood that their cause was a righteous one. And now we find ourselves in a very similar moment, needing to channel that same level of courage, conviction, and character to push back against Donald Trump and his cowardly enablers in this Congress who want to cut the things that matter, like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, Head Start, and also want to turn back the clock. We're trying to move the country forward. These extremists want to take us back to a different time. We are working hard to bring people together, and they are trying to tear us apart. We believe in truth and reconciliation. They want to erase our history, but black history is American history, and we will never let the extremists erase it. And we stand on that history at this moment. This is a valley of the shadow of death moment. But through all of the challenging times that we have confronted, there's always been just enough of us who've showed up, stood up, and spoken up about what is right. Leaders like Reverend Sharpton, organizations like the National Action Network, people like the citizenry all across this country rising up in opposition to this Trump agenda. And as long as we continue to do that at this moment, for such a time as this, demonstrate that same level of courage, conviction, and character. As long as we continue to show up and stand up and speak up for what we know is right, then we will defend the things that matter, defend civil rights, defend voting rights, defend economic justice, defend social justice, defend reproductive justice, defend racial justice, and defend our democracy. Then I'm confident that just as in the past, we will continue America's march toward a more perfect union and make this country the best version of herself. God bless you. God bless Nan. May God continue to bless the United States of America.
I had a thought this morning that I want to share with you about mentorship. I am able to do a lot of what I do because I had great mentors, but there are correct ways and incorrect ways to mentor people, in my opinion. I was mentored as a boy preacher by Bishop F.D. Washington, one of the great Pentecostal preachers of his time. Then Reverend William Jones, who became my pastor after Bishop Washington died, who was unquestionably in the top 5 black church ministers, theologians. Reverend Jesse Jackson, who I started my activism under his leadership, he and Reverend Jones. And I learned politics directly as a youth director from Shirley Chisholm. So even though I didn't finish college, I had the most unique education in the world from being exposed to giants. But the one thing I learned is as I grew older and people started coming younger than me and wanted me to teach and mentor them, the magic of the mentors I had is they did not want me to be their clone. They wanted me to learn things from them and use my own gifts and talent in my own unique way and let me do things on my own, because they knew that if I flopped in some things, it would teach me for the other things. They'll come and help me once I was down, but they were not going to have me avoid being down. And they were not going to impose themselves on me. Why am I saying that? Because too many mentors want clones. And too many mentees want their mentors to put them on a pedestal. Oh, so-and-so didn't do this for me. Oh, so-and-so didn't open doors for me. If they got to open doors for you, it may mean that they knew you weren't ready to go through those doors. Their job is to prepare you. Your job is to develop your own skills, your own unique ways. And I don't care if it's my daughters, who both have come into their own, or anyone else. I'm not a talent agent. I did not form National Action Network to give people their step up. I formed it to fight for justice for everybody. If talented people get in, it's my job to invest and give them a platform. It's their job to get on the platform and perform and show their ability. Sitting with me today in the office as I talk about is one of my mentees, Reverend Stephen Marshall. Now, Stephen, you just came around us when you were how old?
11 years old.
11 years old. You just turned 40 and now you're called to the ministry?
Yes, sir.
And what do you do in National Action Network?
I formulate policies, lead in various regions, but most importantly, I senior advisor to you on all things from social justice strategies, politics, intergovernmental affairs, you name it, community organizing, all of that stuff.
And I could go through scores of others. My daughter started Huddle. They got Huddles now, which is for young people to meet once a week all over the country. I just saw the video from the Las Vegas National Action Network chapter. Now, when you decided to preach, did I ever tell you to become a preacher?
Not one time.
Who called you to preach?
The Lord.
All right. And did I say go to this school or that school?
No, sir.
Did I open this door, that door? Did I tell you be ready when the doors open?
Always be ready and prepared.
And that's what I'm saying. Get you some young people than you that you can help along the way. But don't be their talent agent. Their talent must speak for themselves. And anybody that grumbles with you about so-and-so didn't do something for them, maybe it's because they didn't feel you were ready, or that they felt if they did it, you wouldn't do it on your own. But we all don't live forever. I want the next generation to speak of me, of National Action Network, and others, the way I speak of Reverend Jones and Bishop Washington and Shirley Chisholm and Reverend Jackson. But I just don't want young people to feel that somebody ought to give them the reins of leadership or give them the reins of business or whatever it is you're in. You need to learn from their journey, get the pearls of wisdom from them, but don't have them do for you, because then it means you can't do it for yourself.
I was going to bring you on. Now we're ready for the sermon.
Well, welcome, Reverend Sharpton.
I think it's clear where we are. The real question is what we're going to do about it. The only question is whether we going to get up and do what we supposed to do. They never knew what a cell phone was. They took a telegraph machine and a rotary phone and broke down the walls of apartheid. And we're sitting here with Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and 2 cell phones in your pocketbook talking about what we gonna do. Something is weak and wrong with us. If we got 17 ways to communicate and they only had one way, yet they could pack out rallies every night. They could shut down bus companies. You got 17 ways, got 4 different cell phones, and can't get 5 Negroes together for a meeting. And we must have the self-respect. This ain't about whether you are militant or moderate. It ain't about what organization you. Do you have enough respect for yourself that you're not going to treat me like this? We built this country. We shed blood for this country. We put it on our back. You're not going to do that to us in 2025. That's when Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia, came to me, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., who was pastor here now. That Ethiopian Coptic cross. That was my first year when civil rights and politics.
As far as I know here, you're in trouble. Where it says about 30% are unemployed. That's why I'm working hard to get this surplus food here. Some of you say to me, well, I'm not like you. I'm not a congressman. I haven't got education. I haven't got work. But you're a human being. And you know what you've got? You've got in your hands the power to use your vote and to use even those few cents you get from welfare to spend them only where you want to spend them.
So who is Al Sharpton anyway? Who is this 33-year-old preacher without a church?
A number of black New Yorkers as well. He is little more than a pudgy exhibitionist who can be counted on to show up, bullhorn in hand, at every racial incident.
I often quote Mark Twain saying, the two most important moments in life is the moment you are born and the moment you find out why you were born. I had a very troubling conversation the other day that prompted me to do this little video. Young man that I've known a while came to me and he was crushed, I mean really crushed, because people were criticizing his work. He's in the ministry, but he's also an actor. And he said he couldn't understand why people were jumping all over, criticizing him, trying to find scandalous and derogatory things about him. And I told him, I said, you know, you're very young. You don't know the road I've traveled. They call me everything but a child of God.
A blabbermouth, a loudmouth, too flamboyant, an agitator, a racist,
I had to learn.
Yeah, right.
I was not defined by how others saw me. I was defined by how I saw myself and whether I was being true to myself. Some of you watching this don't like me. And it doesn't matter as long as I know what I'm doing and I like me for being real. So I'm doing this video to say to you, whoever you are and whatever you do, you may not be in ministry or social justice, none of this stuff, but don't live your life worried about opposition or people that don't like you. You can turn that around. Use me as an example. The same people that call me a scam artist, a con artist, a sellout, or racial hustler and all, I kept going. And the people I respected started respecting and publicly embracing my work.
When Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., had this to say about Al Sharpton.
A leader who has protested injustice with a passionate, unrelenting commitment to nonviolent action in the spirit and tradition of Martin Luther King Jr. And I am talking about your leader, our leader, the Reverend Al Sharpton.
The other thing that hasn't changed is the National Action Network's commitment to fight injustice and inequality here in New York City and across America. And that's not only a testament to Reverend Sharpton, it's a testament to all of you who are here tonight.
First and foremost, to Reverend Sharpton. I saw him when he first came on the scene, and I have marveled at his tenacity, at the development of his intellect, and his devotion to our movement, and much he has contributed to the world we are experiencing. I am honored, and I must say that when I had my debate with Dr. King on the issue of the church and religion, he didn't warn me that after his departure, his space would be filled by another preacher, and that preacher would be Al Sharpton.
All you want in life is people that matter to you to say you did all right. And more important, that you can look in the mirror and say you did all right.
Thank you, Rev. Thanks for that introduction. Look, we've known each other for a long time. I'm grateful not only for your leadership and partnership, but quite frankly, more importantly, for your friendship. And thanks to all of you, members of our nation's most important civil rights organization.
You have been, over all of your years, such an extraordinary leader. You are a voice of truth, a voice of conscience, a voice of practicality around what we must address and what we can do. And I thank you so much for your friendship.
I remember that most of the youth around Al's age, he was about 12, wanted to be like Connie Hawkins, a great basketball player, legend, or Earl the Pearl, or Clyde Frazier. Al wanted to be like Adam Powell, a powerful preacher with a social justice gospel. He was very close to, at that time, to Reverend William Augustus Jones, powerful preacher and social justice advocate, and Reverend Gardner Taylor stayed right down the street, and Bishop Washington, whose church he came from, and Reverend Sandy Ray. He wanted to be like these giant preachers. He wanted them to have the edge, however, of the King's social justice dimension. He wanted to be like them, now he's one of them. Perhaps taller than most of them because of the risks he has taken and the reward God has given him with his gift. I remember so well that I first escorted him to jail. He was around 13 years old with the jail fighting the ANP. He was in the lineage of our struggle. He grew up in it. We didn't just see him on TV one night. He didn't happen. He came bottom up, not top down.